All right, Rob, let's get to it. You mentioned Derek Jeter going into the Hall today. He is the number one, he's the story. I mean, everybody's talking about Derek Jeter, and rightly so. 5 World Series championships. I actually think, Rob, Derek Jeter is underrated. Because when I hear people, and I'm talking about pundits.
It's funny you say that because some fans say he's overrated, which is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. But
right.
Go ahead.
Fans, pundits, but a lot of people, and like I said, it's not just fans. I hear people, they act like we only give love to Derek Jeter or we only, recognize him as a great player because he won all those World Series playing in New York. And I'm like, I get that, but don't act like he was not just a great player. He may not have been, as great as Alex Rodriguez, who was a shortstop as well. He may not have. That was a great era of shortstops, obviously, but he won several Gold Gloves. He batted .310 for his career.
Yep,
.310 for his career, and won an MVP. Like, why are we acting?
6th all-time on hits. 6th. In the history of the game, 6th.
So, correct. Tell me, Rob, because obviously, I followed the sport, but you followed it closer than me. I think he's underrated. I'm sorry. And again, I'm not saying he's one of the best 10 or 15 players of all time. I'm just saying I feel like people give him short shrift. Like, just because he won, he's this and that, but, he really wasn't that guy. I heard somebody today say, mockingly, he wasn't Ken Griffey Jr. He wasn't as good as Ken Griffey Jr., which is fine.
But he doesn't have to be Ken Griffey Jr. But when you look at his body of work, Chris, I'm with you. And I was working in New York at Newsday when he broke in as a rookie, Chris. He came up in 95, and then 96, he won the American League Rookie of the Year. You remember his first game? He had a home run in his first game. Like, he had so many magical moments. There you go.
What did he do for his 3,000th hit? Was it a grand slam?
Yep. Off of David Price, if I remember correctly, at Yankee Stadium. I covered that game. Chris, the first game ever, postseason game that played into November. Remember he hit the home run to win the game?
Yep.
And they held up the sign, Mr. November. There was the shovel play to home plate that nailed Giambi at the plate against the A's.
Remember that
the Yankees were down 0-2 in that series, and they had to go to Oakland, Chris. And if I remember correctly, win all 3 games. If I remember, they went to Oakland.
I remember that. Yep.
And he made that unbelievable.
I thought they were dead in the water.
Right.
I thought they were dead in the water.
He shouldn't have been on that side of the field. Like, what was he doing there?
Nah, Jeter, and you hit it. I mean, what we remember about him are those clutch moments in the playoffs. And I do think, Rob, and look, obviously in football and basketball, I think winning rings has become more important, if you will, or more talked about than ever. Right? Not that it wasn't important back in the day.
It's just more conversation. I agree with
we
that.
talk more and more about winning rings and hold it against players more than we used to if they don't have a ring. Baseball, I actually think in baseball, Rob, it might be going the other way. Or maybe just never. It was never just about the rings.
I think because people understand, like a Ted Williams, Chris, who was a great hitter. Nobody can take that away. The Red Sox couldn't make the playoffs.
Right.
Ted Williams played in
and
one
back then, it was crazy. You had to be the best team in your league.
Right. And I think he played in the World Series one time, Chris. That was it.
Yep.
And that doesn't mean that are we going to sit here and say Ted Williams, who's the last guy to bat 400, 406, wasn't a great player?
Right.
They didn't have pitching.
Right.
They didn't have a good team. But Ted Williams was a great player, and we understand in baseball it's not the same. Mike Trout is a great player. Chris, is he the reason the Angels can't make the playoffs or play 500 ball? He's not the reason.
And look at Shohei, Rob, right now.
Right.
And he actually is doing both.
He's doing both and great.
You can't blame him for them not making the playoffs.
Exactly. So baseball's different. It's not like basketball where one or two guys can really make a difference. And in football, it's mostly about the quarterback. You know that. It's not about a defensive player. It's about a quarterback.
We'll get into that later. Now, you're right. I mean, we put more on the quarterback than we actually should, and we'll get into that later. Hint, hint. With the athletic rating, Tom Brady is the best football player of all time. So we'll get into that in that discussion. But I do think, Rob, in light of the fact there's so many greats, and I know you can't do this in reality, but let's say take away all the suspicions or beliefs or whatever about Barry Bonds and the PEDs, right?
Yep.
Even I've never seen anything like that in baseball.
No.
I've never, ever seen anything like that in baseball, whereas we've said many times, 7 out of 10 times you fail. Right. And this dude, every single at-bat, it was like, I got to watch. Like, you expected him to hit it out the park. Because you just never
knew what he could do, exactly. Right. And even, you were talking about it, Chris, the World Series he was in 2002, he batted .471.
Yep.
The Giants, right? Yep. The Giants lost.
And they lost.
Do we hang that on Barry Bonds? You can't.
You can't. And so, you look at that career, and he didn't win a World Series. But I do think, in a way, that makes Jeter's 5 World Series even that much more impressive. I get it. It's the Yankees. Back then, you talk about the Dodgers spending money, Rob. I mean, obviously, the Yankees were spending like crazy back then. And they just have the history of winning.
Right,
and, he was part of that.
No doubt. But when they won in 1996, Chris, they had a 17-year drought of winning championships. Right. So the Yankees were always spending money, but they weren't winning.
Right.
They went from, I think, was it 80? What they went last one? 81? Or, they went from like
17 years.
It was something like
96. Yeah, it would have been 80, something like that.
Something like that. But, Chris, they hadn't won in that much time, right? And then Jeter comes along, plays a little bit in 95, and then in 96 they win. They don't go they lose in the second round, I think, or in the playoffs in 97. Then they run off 98, 99, 2000, right? And then they won his fifth championship in 2009. All I'm saying is, I'm with you. He has all the stats, but he also won, and he was a catalyst. He weren't there for the ride. Chris, you remember the diving play in the stands where he blooded his face? You remember that play?
Yep. He was the catalyst on those teams. I'm sorry, I think he was the best player on those teams. Some of those teams, Rob, weren't stacked. I mean, Bernie Williams,
Jorge Posada. They had good players.
Was well past his prime. Posada, you know what I mean? Like, they weren't chock full of Hall of Famers.
No, it was a lot of the Yankee that players that they developed.
O'Neill,
right, and then some other guys that they added in, like you mentioned, Strawberry and O'Neill, and people like that. Charlie Hayes, who had bounced around a couple teams. Chris, Cecil Fielder was a late season trade. Remember that one year when they won?
Knobloch.
Yep. So I'm with you on that. Derek Jeter had an unbelievable career. I think one of the greatest, if you ask me.
I agree. And you brought it up yesterday, and you said, whose career would you rather have than his? If we keep it to baseball, I mean, I can go back and say a Mickey Mantle, Joe DiMaggio, guys who, back then the Yankees were winning seemingly every year. Right. So they got tons of rings, and they obviously were tremendous individual players. And we talk about them, they're legends. But modern day, Rob, I got to be honest. If Barry Bonds didn't have all the suspicions about PEDs or just downright we know he used them, I would say him maybe, but I can't because of that. You could argue Hank Aaron. Mm-hmm. I think just because, he's always regarded as the home run champ and all he did get one World Series win, although he didn't play in a ton of playoffs. I think he played in 3 or 4 postseasons. But modern day, like 80s, 90s on, Rob, I can't think of a baseball player whose career I'd rather have. There were those that were better, but I'd rather have Jeter's career than Ken Griffey Jr.'s because Jeter won. He had great individual numbers, and he won.
And Griffey got hurt a lot, Chris. You know, in Cincinnati, that derailed his.
Griffey would have done some special things.
He would have had over 700 home runs.
Right.
Absolutely.
He might have ended up being a home run king.
He was on track to be that before Bonds. And those 4 bad years in Cincinnati, when I say bad, injury plagued is what I mean.
Right.
But I'm with you. I think Derek Jeter had the perfect career. No hiccups. Chris, you said it. 310 batting average. He didn't fall off the last 5 years.
Right. It wasn't like
and have his average fall like, you know what I mean, like under 300. He won championships. He was the captain of the Yankees, playing in New York. No scandals, Chris. No, you know what I mean? Like he couldn't deal with the media, or they were always like he just knew how to handle it. I think he had a perfect career. I don't know. I would be hard pressed to come up with with the hiccups or the bad moments. What were the bad moments for Derek Jeter? I don't see it.
Right.